Ladies and gentlemen, I am Yezreel, the game is Star Trek Online, and welcome to Starbase Valhalla, home of the 12th Fleet. Yes, we have a slight tribble problem. Despite repeated purges, all you need to do is miss one tribble, and 3 days later you have 1,771,561 of the little blighters, and the food stores on Deck 3 are empty again. But that's not why we're here. We're here to take a look at Tier 3 of the Iconian Resistance Reputation. Yes, that's right, I've completed it, I am on to Tier 4. The traits first. Radiant Detonation gives you a 5% chance on the ground to do a 46.1% radiation AoE, and more to the point, it removes buffs, which is really the main thing. So grab yourself a rapid firing weapon and make best use of that. There is no indication whether or not it has an internal cooldown as far as I can tell. If we hop over to the traits menu, we might see that later on. If we take a look on the defensive side, we have the destabilizing phase screen. This is a 3-second autoimmune that occurs once every 60 seconds. It is automatic. There is no trigger. Essentially every 3 seconds, starting with the first hit and refreshing every 60 seconds, you gain an immunity to all damage. So it's debatable how useful this is going to be. All your opponent has to do is lead with a weak hit, and let's face it, even most AI enemies don't lead with their strongest ability, and you're happy for the next 3 seconds and then all hell breaks loose once again. So if we pop over to the traits menu, let's pull out a couple of ground traits. We'll deactivate nanofibers for the moment. And for some reason I can't deactivate ground traits. That's interesting. Weird. You'd think on a ground map I'd be able to alter my ground traits. That's very strange. However, destabilizing phase screen. When damaged, gain immunity to all damage for 30 seconds. No mention of that. And radiant detonation module. Okay, so that functions as a buff. And why can I not unslot my... that's interesting. I can't alter any of my traits, possibly because I am on a Starbase map, but that is a very weird little bug if it's true. We'll hop over to sector space when we're done and see if we can try that on a different map. Back on topic, however, we have also got some new projects to play with. The Iconian Pulse Wave is available, as are the kit modules. So let's bring up the Pulse Wave. Personal shield mark, Pulse Wave Mark 12, here we are. So, 172.5 anti-proton damage for 138 DPS, damage reduces over range, 50% chance for a repel effect, and you gain 1 radiant charge counter for 60 seconds every time you pull the trigger. The radiant proc on hit, 56.1 temporary hit points for 15 seconds, can stack up to 5 times, essentially a ground version of the radiant proc that we've all been making use of in space. And then a crit H and a crit D bonus on the side, not too shabby. The Arcwave setting requires 6 radiant charge counters as far as I can tell from this, but what you get is a fairly good chance of a solid knockback, 22.5 meters, and a decent chunk of damage, as well as a very fast recharge, 1.5 seconds. However, since you can't generate radiant charge counters for 10 seconds, that is odd to say the least. You then also get the Radiant proc, the 10% charge, as well as the crit D and the crit H bonuses, and it ties into the reinforced combat circuitry and the subatomic fields. That's a very weird secondary fire if I'm reading it correctly. I may not be. Photonic barrier generators, we saw these on Tribble. They are interesting. Gives you 168.4 temporary hit points every 3 seconds, as well as +9 all damage resistance, so long as you stay within the barrier's effect. However, unless they have changed this since we looked at these on Tribble, that temporary hit points isn't hit points as such, it is temporary shielding, which means that shield penetrating weapons like, for example, the TR-116B go right through it. They do not care. So either Cryptic have fixed that, I haven't looked of late, or they really need to rename this as temporary shielding, or people are going to get very, very confused. Science characters get photonic overload. This is, well, it's more for the minus damage than anything else. Perception is not a big stat on the ground. Then again, I've never been on the receiving end of this, but generally you're at such close ranges that, well, finding an enemy isn't really a problem. And the damage, well, 35.9 damage, 1.2 DPS, the numbers say it all, don't they? It's really that minus 49% or damage. If somebody's charging a big attack, or if there's a group coming away that's about to unload, you hit them with that, and hey presto, they're suddenly firing blanks. Security get possibly the most boring of the modules, but it's also pretty handy. Bonus 15% damage and 30 critical severity for 12 seconds. What can I say? It's not the most impressive of toys, but it's a good, solid buff with no drawbacks. Meanwhile, the deflector, the advanced torpedo, and the radiant field are as they were, and in space, I believe we get the engines. Let's scroll down and double check. Tier 3. Indeed, the hyper impulse engines come in at this tier as well. They're not the warp core. I mean, the warp core is the standout piece of this set with its hot restart of the weapons. However, you do get an extra 8.8 damage resistance rating when you're at full throttle, as well as extra flight speed and turn rate, and of course +5 engine power setting for that extra bit of speed. So if you're in a pilot ship or a battle cruiser, this is worth looking at. And, well, tanking ships generally tend to move fairly rapidly anyway, so heavy cruisers might also find this of use. Very much a defensive set. If you're looking for raw DPS, then you might want to look elsewhere. But against the Iconians, often survival's the problem. Those guys throw out a lot of damage. But as I said, if you're going to buy one piece from the Iconian set, make it the warp core, because hey, hot restart of weapons. Deflector, of course, gives you a lot of defensive abilities, and then we have the torpedo and the radiant field, which are lower tier. Might come back to those if I ever get them. Finally, of course, we have the store. The only real addition here is the radiant torpedoes. Cryptic have actually described it in the reputation track as being radiant projectile weapons. Well, it's just torpedoes actually. There are no mine launchers this time around. Mines have seemingly gone out of fashion again. They cover pretty much every possible mod here. Bear in mind that Radiant occupies one of the mod slots, so yes, these are purple quality. Radiant Act 2, Radiant Act Crit H, etc, etc. Obviously, if you're running a high crit shot, your best bet is probably going to be the Radiant Crit D times 2 under the current meta, provided you've got that 16% crit and decent accuracy set up from your other bonuses. 19,125 dilithium per torpedo launcher. Bit pricey, but if you need a torpedo and you're chasing that Radiant upgrade, because hey, 33% chance, courtesy of the lower fire rate on the quantum torpedo, relevant to a beam weapon, then yeah, that's going to be a torpedo worth looking at. It is of course a quantum tube, so it's compatible with all the other torpedo skills such as high yield and spread. And that pretty much rounds it up for the gears. So let's see if it's just the Starbase map that's jamming us here as far as trait switching goes. Get the tribble out the way, make sure there's nothing on the pad, and break the render engine. That's interesting. Apparently there is a bug in the transporter pad roof. Yoink, yoink, yoink. And then, yep, I can zoom the camera through the transporter roof. Cryptic. Anyhow, return to center. Right, so here we are back in sector space. Let's bring up the traits menu. Can I slot in that slot? Yes, I can, and I can slot on ground as well. Interesting. For some reason, you cannot slot on the Starbase map. So, we'll pull out medical nanites. We will pop in the... Let's see, it was the personal energy amplifier, wasn't it? No, it wasn't. Energized nanites. Notice nanite. Ah, there we go. Radiant detonation. So trait is now active, and I'm then going to have to go back onto a ground map to check the buff effect. And then dock up. Actually, it might be an instance thing. I wonder. Oh, another little camera bug there. We got to look at the back of the starbase as the flyby camera, beamby camera? Beamby, I suppose is a better term, swung round. But... So, buffs. Where the blazes did I leave the buffs? Here we are. Blood of the Warrior, that's from the 700 set, 700 day veteran, 25 driver core, 25 structural integrity. Where is my radiant module? Let's try the dilithium mine instead. I need to swing by there to do some work anyway. This is irritating. Okay, radiant detonation module. Again, nothing on my buffs at present. Roll it in. Contact traffic control and beam to the surface. Really? Paperwork? You're bothering me now? No. Okay, so again, no mention of the Radiant module buff. It may just be a proc. I may be misreading the way this triggers. And yeah, it's instant. Looks like it's instance maps, possibly fleet maps, block you from changing traits. That could be a little awkward. Radiant detonation. Radiant detonation module. Is it in the powers? No, rifle butt, rebreather, then it goes straight to pulse wave setting. So there's nothing in radiant detonation module. I don't see a buff. I don't see a trait. It doesn't say passive. Maybe it's in the weapons fire section. Maybe I'm being very, very stupid here. In which case I need the powers map and pulse wave setting. There we go. Radiant detonation on 2 target, 5% chance, 46.1 and 5%, and removes buffs. So there we go. It's a weapon proc that adds in. That's why it's not showing there. Cryptic, all is forgiven. Well, except for possibly that camera bug. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, when we'll be looking at Tier 4 of the Iconian... Oh, wait, before I forget, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, your spoiler warning for the tier. Let us bring forth her.
I am, once again, an exile. When I was forced to leave Romulus more than 2 decades ago, I went deep into the Beta Quadrant, far beyond where your ships have ever gone. There, I found the tools I needed to rebuild my life and create an empire. Now I have passed through the Prophet's Gate in my quest to defeat the Iconians, and I am in a place where no one considers me a half-breed or a traitor. I am one alien among many. For most of my life, the greatest insult you could make would be to call me human. Now, in a place where no human has ever been, I often find myself wondering what she would think of this place, what she would think of me. But I don't have time for self-pity or regret. I seek those who could help us end this war. When I find them, I will tell them everything they need to know, if they will listen.
Right, speculation time. So, Sela was forced to leave Romulus. Yes, for those of you not familiar with the backstory, she lost a power struggle with Denatra and the Tal Shiar. She ended up exiled rather than dead, which in Romulan politics is getting off lightly. She toggled off into the Beta Quadrant. She then found the Hirogen, did a deal with them, rebuilt her power base, came back, declared herself Empress, split the Romulan Empire down the middle, and the rest is history. Right, the Prophet's Gate. My first thought is that that's a reference to the Bajoran wormhole, but that doesn't quite make sense, because the Prophets... it would put her in the Gamma Quadrant if it's true, but the Prophets haven't really been doing very much of late, for one thing. And for another, the last time we saw her, we were in the Iconian gateway hubs, so she'd have had to get herself out of the Iconian network, halfway across the quadrant, past DS9 security, and through the Bajoran wormhole to pull that. Then again, maybe she's found a back door somewhere in the Iconian hub. We did rather leave in a hurry without making sure of her. However, this is an interesting bit. For most of my life, of course, Sela's mother is Tasha Yar. What would she think of me? Probably an insipid little girl in need of a good spanking, but that's probably just what the actress thinks. Anyhow, in a place where no human has ever been. Okay, so we're either looking at somewhere in the Andromeda Galaxy, parallel dimension, or really, really far out in Beta, Gamma, or Delta, because she's very certain of that. Don't have time for self-pity or regret. I seek those who could help us end this war. Could be the Prophets, could be the Kelvans. If she's out in Andromeda, they've certainly got the tech for it. They were managing intergalactic travel when we were still figuring out how to get across the Great Barrier. They just toddled across it like it was nothing. Could also be the Q, or any of another of Uber's species. I dare say we'll find out at Tier 4 when the next featured episode hits. But properly this time. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, farewell.